welcome back everyone to the Game Dev Discussion Podcast. It's good to be back. It's been took a bit of a break. After end of 2020, I was kind of burnt out a bit, so it's good to take some time off. For long-time listeners or new listeners, in particular, share this one. Make sure everyone knows. We're sort of back up and running. Just so you know, the podcast is going from a weekly podcast to bi-weekly. Just give me a bit more time to edit things up. Take it a bit slower, not so full on. But we're back with one of our original guests, Tim Simpson. How you doing, man?
Good, man. It's good to be back. It's been quite a while since that first podcast. It was what, year and a half?
2 years.
Maybe 2 years ago.
2 years ago. It's 2 years ago
Wow.
in February or March. One of the two.
God, that time flies.
Dude, it's so weird from then to now. Like back then, I think you were still with Warner Bros. Or Ubisoft. I was still with Live 5, and now you're my art director. It's weird actually talking to you like this.
Yeah, just more of like just sit down and like I guess more of a formal conversation because like me and you, we chit chat pretty casually on almost every day. So it's
weird.
But yeah, I'm super glad to be working with you, man. It's awesome. I'm really glad you joined the team.
I always tell people the story. I've still got the ArtStation inbox. I messaged you. Like I think it was during that really shitty Egyptian piece I just did. It was like 4 years ago. And I was like, hey, I'm looking to get in Ubisoft. And like you're at Ubisoft. What do you think? And he gave me like a bunch of pointers. And it's so weird. Like that was 4 years ago. And then 2 years later he came on the podcast. And then it was like beginning of this year, Joy Counterplay. It's just so weird how things could change.
Like this periodic like checking in, I guess. But I'm like, I think I might have said this in the last podcast, but I'm always still blown away by like your career progression and your skill progression since like that initial scene. I was like, okay, yeah, it looks like kind of like some junior artwork, and now you're banging out like senior level artwork every single day, and you say, oh yeah, it's 4 years, but like a lot of people take longer than that to go from like junior to senior, right? And I think it just shows your passion, and pretty much like the whole thesis of what I've always been talking about for the longest time is like if people just go all in on what they're passionate about, their skills are just going to skyrocket, right? Rather than being like, okay, there's more job opportunities for, say someone wants to really be a character artist, right? And they're like, oh, there's more job opportunities for environments. So I'm just going to go that way because I want to get a job, right? Your initial stuff that you sent me was like all environment based. I could see you're passionate about environments and you just double down, like, you're into environments, lighting, some of the tech side of things. So it all kind of, you're investing your time in something that is going to really pay off and you're going to make you happy in the long run versus you trying to be like, well, now I have to try and pivot into this other thing, right? Like it seems to me, working with you on a daily basis that you're more than happy to kind of just go all in on that and continue down that path. So that's great to see, man.
It's funny because you keep a toe in kind of like the communities. I can even remember it was after I just dropped Safe House, you check back in, you just dropped it out of the blue, completely out of the blue. Another message is just like, hey, dude, you've like applied to feedback. Like I dropped Safe House scene, I did a bunch of material work, and you were like, hey, shit, man, like you've been really like applying this shit. Fair play. And I was like, fuck, that's crazy. Like you still keep an eye on the community and on that.
Yeah, like I remember, like I think you're like your name had kind of like it rang a bell, and then I was like, no, was that guy? Like I think I actually went back to the inbox. I was like, huh? Like the A and B before and after, I was like, holy shit, was this guy just being like plugged into the Matrix for like the last, I think it had only been about maybe a year difference. It was shocking, but it really shows like that you had just kind of doubled down and really just focused. And I was like, wow, like this is almost like night and day. So it shows, if you invest your time wisely, it can really pay off, like, which is awesome.
Yeah, I remember at the time I was literally when I was like messaging you, I was also like every day like sending out applications, and I was basically like, you know what, I'm gonna ignore applying anywhere for the next year. I remember one of the critiques I got that for that Egyptian piece was like your materials suck, like your sand reads like wax, your water doesn't read like water, your concrete reads like plastic. And I was like, okay, up at that point I hated materials. Texturing and materials were like my worst thing, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to make this my strongest thing. So I spent a full year like just doing materials only. And I think I remember people saying to me, like, are you an environment artist or a materials artist? Because all you're doing is posting map balls. I was like, well, I want to try and make it something I'm good at. So just completely went all in on it. And like I said, so far it's worked out. Hasn't gone tip-top yet.
It really paid off. Because I think I did notice like maybe one of your sci-fi mat balls popped up before the Safe House, something like that. And I was like, oh wow, this like looks a lot more advanced than the art stuff I saw, and I was like, okay, cool. And then that's probably like one of those little anchors that helps me
Mhm.
remember your name, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously, because back then we weren't talking every day, but like it was just kind of oh Alex, yeah, yeah, Alex, oh Beddoes, yeah, okay, cool. And then when your safe house scene popped up, it was very clear like you'd taken the material stuff to heart because like I remember there was a lot of different surfaces in there. You had those like nice camera pans and stuff that showed the environment, and a
Mhm.
lot of the surfaces had different levels of reflectivity, stuff like that. So it had really shown you paid attention to that. I guess you would say maybe it was like one of your weak points in the past, but you really doubled down and just almost went kind of like in a vertical on that skill set, right?
Mhm.
Really got good at that, and then applied it to like the more macro aspect of like an entire environment, right? So you've kind of figured out how materials worked, how to get things to read to different surfaces, and then you
Mhm.
apply that on a larger scale rather than I think what a lot of people do is they try and tackle everything at
Yeah.
once and can get overwhelmed, and it just kind of leads to everything kind of being uh, mediocre, right? But I think by your approach of going in and tackling that one aspect of environment design and environment creation, it really helped. Hold on, I'm just going to close these blinds because it's
No worries, man. Yeah, I was
the
gonna say you're
sun is
getting
like
like brighter and brighter.
literally peeking like through the window here. Hopefully that helps.
That's all
Oh,
good.
there's still gonna be like a laser line right on my face. So there we
Um,
go.
yeah,
But yeah,
dude.
I think that really helped your progress.
Yeah, it's weird because it's like every. It's funny because I look back at the way I was like before that point, and it's like I was trying to do everything. I was trying to learn Blender at the same time. I was trying to like learn substance designer, really get to grips with like good quality game practices. And now, like all my mentees, they're always like, okay, so I've never opened Unreal before. I've never really opened Paint or Designer, and I'm going to learn all of these things in this one mentorship. And I'm like, yeah, you probably need to spend like 6 months on just one of them things. Like, don't even think about the other stuff, and then like tackle it by
Yeah,
those
you can
chunks.
almost design yourself a curriculum, right? Be like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna go all in on Spencer for the next 3 months. I'm not gonna worry about like learning all X other things. I'm not gonna try and like focus on lighting or anything like that. Like just kind of learn the building blocks of a skill set of like
Mm-hmm.
everything that you need for environment creation, right? Like, okay, I need to learn how to do materials, world composition, like lighting, but then just focus on each one of those for a dedicated chunk of time, right? Because if you try and do it all at once, you're going to be like, okay, I can't remember what I was doing with the lighting stuff like 3 weeks ago. Now, then, like my next project, I have to like relearn all of that almost, right? But if you dedicate like 3 to 4 months to just really focusing on one part of that skill set, it's going to become more habitual and like almost like second nature, right? When you go to do it again on another project.
Yeah.
But by trying to do it all at once, you're just going to be like you're always repeating those first steps. Like I remember a while back, I was trying to learn substance designer and I didn't stick with it, right? So that's probably one of my weaknesses at the moment. But like if I was to go get back into it, I would have to redo all of those
Mm-hmm.
basic like brick tutorials and stuff just to be like, oh, what do those nodes even do? Whereas if I had spent like 6 months to a year just dedicated on that, like, that would just be a core pillar of my skill set at this point, rather than always doing the same like beginning steps over and over and over because I forgot. It's been so long since I opened the program.
So it's weird because our well ex colleague at this point, Kurt Cooper, like betrayed us and gone to he's at the initiative, Microsoft Initiative now. But he was one that he tipped me off about the fact that you're still on Polycount. Like he's like, hey dude, you seen this? And it's like, yeah, Tim was always active on Polycount. It's like, no, this is recent. And I was like, oh shit, like, and we'll trawl him through and like, yeah, he's still dropping golden knowledge. Like, what? Why have you stuck around with Polycount for this long? Like, because I think a lot of people, myself included, up until that point, was like, I think it's pretty much dead at this point. But you're still
Yeah,
there, and there's still plenty of other people asking questions there, and people dropping knowledge.
I think like it is definitely an underutilized resource these days, especially with the advent of like social platforms like Instagram, ArtStation, where it's more of just like an output kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Polycount is a great place to get some actual input, right? Like that's where you can get savage critiques. And I think it definitely used to have a reputation of like being a little bit of a scary place for people to post their work. Although like I've always found the community super nice if you're respectful and you're genuinely looking to get some feedback and stuff and not just like kind of disregard it or be really combative when like a pro gives you feedback. If you can kind of like learn to kind of drop the ego a bit. I know I had one as a youngling like learner, right? But yeah, one of the main reasons I'm still active on there is, I mean, that was one of the cornerstone kind of resources I used to get good and get my first job in the industry is like internet forums, Polycount being like probably the biggest one. So I'm still happy to go on there and I'll just leave it in one of my tabs open in one of my browsers most of the time, kind of alongside ArtStation, check the different sections and see where I can quickly help, at least offer a little bit of guidance, because
Hmm.
I had the same, people doing that for me when I was coming up into the industry. So it really doesn't take too much of my time. And I think, like, obviously building my whole personal brand with Polygon Academy and stuff like that
Hmm.
too, by just offering value at some point in the future, yeah, maybe I'll have courses or something like that, right? Uh, by giving people so much value up front, they're already going to be a super fan. So they're going to be probably more willing to, help me out when I drop a product or something.
Hmm.
So it's just like my whole mindset is just give, 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 give. And then when I have something like to offer, then they'll probably be, I've already gotten hundreds of dollars of value out of Tim. Hopefully, like, I'll
Yeah,
buy
yeah.
this little mini tutorial or something, right? From a business standpoint, it makes sense, but just from a karmic standpoint too, right? Like, by giving back. I mean, obviously, here's a prime example. It wasn't necessarily Polycount, but by giving you advice and feedback,
Yeah.
now I have a badass artist on my team that I can kind of deploy against any issues that I'm like, oh man, I need someone to handle this. Well, there's Alex. Like, we have a great relationship,
Mhm.
and it's been like that multi-step process, right? But by investing a little bit of my time just to give you some guidance and feedback, now I can. Sometimes I'll ask like tough tasks of you, and I know you can handle it, right? But so there's that give and take. So it's who knows? Like, I could probably end up working with some of the young kids on Polycount that are asking for their portfolio reviews, or hey, what's why am I not getting like job
Mm.
feedback and stuff like that. I can kind of hopefully give them sometimes a reality check, sometimes an encouraging
Mhm.
bit of feedback. Ideally, those two go in hand, like real talk, but also, hey, like, keep going. It's awesome. Like, because I had people say that to me in the past, right? Like, oh, don't give up. Like, yeah, you might, these three pieces, I mean, I might have just told you they suck, but like, this one's really good. And I could see the diamond in the rough. And then that instantly for me was like, when I got feedback like that, it was like, cool. It's time to double down. Like, I'm the diamond in the rough. I'm
Mhm.
like Aladdin, baby. Like, I'm on the come up on this. So I think just by dedicating a bit of time and giving back, it's a really good feeling for sure.
I think it's that whole. It's kind of like it's whether knowing when to put the sort of the arm on someone or use the stick and give them some tough love. Thing is though is I do feel like that's the thing you need to learn to if you're gonna thrive in this industry. Learning very quickly to like not get upset when people critique your art, and not just critique like be particularly brutal. Like there's a really an infamous Discord, the 3D Fast Track, where they're basically some of the best hard surface modelers in the industry, and it's some really good names in there. And if you post something in there, it doesn't matter how good your piece is, they will nitpick that thing to death, and like they are
Yeah.
really honest. And it's like, yeah, okay, I can imagine some people seeing that and being very offended or upset by it. But it's like I have seen some of the best artwork this year. People art from Rick Reeve, John Joe, Jay, like all of them people, like they're spitting out some of the best artwork, and it comes from all of the feedback I've seen them get. Like there's been times when I've seen like the vending machine John Joe did. I was like, that's probably done. That's pretty good. You've got it to the point where I'm like, I haven't really got much to say. And then I see him post it in 3D Fast Track, and they're like, oh, that particular thing there, that exact detail, that ain't correct. That isn't correct. Here's your reference. You got it wrong. And I'm like, yeah, they don't hold back, no matter how good it is. And
Yeah.
that's why it produces great artists. I think that's something.
Yeah, I think so. Like, the tough love kind of feedback, I think I know that people have different stances on it, right? Like, especially if you
Mhm.
spend a lot of time on Twitter or something like that, you'll see people like, oh, posting art. I don't want feedback. I don't want critiques. And for me, like, I mean, everyone has their own, I guess, barometer for what
Mhm.
what they want or what they take. But if for me, if I'm an artist, obviously I'm not going to be satisfied with everything I do. But I'm always looking to get better. So
Mhm.
I don't take it personally when someone says, hey, maybe you should fix these three things as a paint over or something like that. I'm like, even if I don't agree with it, I'm still going to be like, oh, thank you for going out of your way, unless like they're a complete dick about it.
Yeah.
But I think also, given the fact that it's an online message board or Twitter or something, it can be easy to misconstrue someone's intent. But
Yes.
I think if you look at the actual intent behind it, and 90% of the times you can see they're actually trying to help you, even if you don't agree with it, it's still good to actually look at that and think about it, because it'll make you think about your art in a different way, right? Even just sometimes someone saying, hey, like, the proportions are off on this, you could be like, oh, maybe that is one of my weak points, is like the proportions. I get that comment a lot. Maybe I should
Mhm.
study like anatomy, or figure out how to give an object weight or something like that, right? So if it's something that continually people are bringing up, it's probably exposing one of your weaknesses. And a lot of people, they actually don't like to hear that, right? Like, they just want to be told, oh, it's amazing, it's done, you don't have to touch it ever again. But this working in the studio, how many times is something just done right off the bat and you get to walk away with it, or like
Mm.
half finish it and be like, oh, okay, I'm done. Those are the two biggest things I see of like beginner artists, of like, oh, I'm not going to apply any of that feedback. I'll keep it for my next piece. Or, I'm kind of just got bored of this. I'm going to abandon this project. And
Hmm.
you don't get either of those options when you're being paid to do this in a studio,
Yeah.
right? And so that's a bad habit to start ingraining into yourself, of being like, I can just walk away from it. Whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just a personal piece of project. That's true, like a personal project, but like that's true, but it starts to ingrain bad habits, right? And like
Hmm.
a mindset of like, oh, I don't need to improve. I just want to hear it's good. And if that's my audience I want to feed it to, and I don't want more experienced artists to tell me, hey, there's a few things you could make better. Like, you're not going to improve as an artist, and you're not going to make like, you can make way more money the better of an artist you become. So
Yeah.
that, even if from a strictly financial standpoint, like, you should want to apply and get better as an artist, because your bank account will get bigger and bigger, right? Like, it's if someone's stuck at that, like, oh, I only do commissions on Twitter for $5, and I try and double my rates, and I can't seem to do it. Like, there's probably, you're capped out, right? Like, your skill level is probably holding you
Hmm.
back, because there's people on any platform doing commissions that are making like $100 an hour plus, right? Like,
Hmm.
some person will do like $1,000 commission, and then the $5 commission person will look at that and be like, well, maybe they know how to market themselves better, or there's usually a litany of excuses. Oh, I don't want to overcharge for my art, right? It's like,
Hmm.
no, like, you need to make a living wage as an artist, and like $5 for like 4 or 5 hours worth of work,
It's
you're never you're going to be able to survive on that, and not only survive but thrive, right? Like, you want to be thriving as an artist, because it gives you more freedom and creativity, right?
that thing about the whole, like, when you quit a project. I mean, it's only been this year, like back in 2020, as a personal project I started and I haven't finished, and we'll get back to at some point. Taking a break from sort of personal art. I've been cranking away for 3 years straight. I need to chill for a bit. But there's one thing it has, like, and I know you'll get this, boys. See the Gymshark t-shirt. When you give yourself an out, like, I know when my best, like, sort of 2 years of training, when I was still playing professional sport, and I was just outside the gym every single day. It was great. And as soon as I started saying, you know what, I'm a little bit tired today, I'm not gonna go. Or I'd be like, I know I'm meant to go, but I'm just gonna give myself an out. And it's like,
Yeah,
oh, I did it once last. You know what? I did it like a couple of weeks ago. I'll do it again.
exactly.
And
The
then,
momentum starts to shift in the opposite direction,
yes.
right? Like, when you're super consistent with something, the whole like 30 days to build a habit. Yeah, that's great. But if you keep that momentum up, you'll get things will get easier and easier. But the
Hmm.
second you start to like kind of let that momentum slip, or even just go into maintenance mode, sometimes you do need to throw aspects of your life into maintenance mode, right? Like, you can't be like improving in all aspects of your life at a time. But the second you let things start to slip into like, I'll do it next week, I'll do it, that next week suddenly becomes next month, and then like, I experienced this myself, right? When I took a sabbatical a few years back, it was like right when I quit Ubisoft. I started with like the sabbatical with the best intentions of like, oh, I'm going to do all of this personal work. I'm going to start all of these businesses and stuff. And then, like, the first couple of months were good. I was working on some stuff, and then I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to take like a month, chill, play video games, and then, like, I'm not saying don't take vacations and don't take breaks,
Mm.
because I'm a huge proponent of traveling, taking vacation, taking time off, right? But like, it just became more of a negative habit, right? I'm just gonna chill, play video games. Maybe I'll go to the gym, and then it almost started to like creep that like that lack of direction, and like listlessness started to creep into other aspects, right? I'm gonna half-ass it at the gym, then I'm gonna stop at McDonald's on the way home,
Yeah, yeah.
get that, like, it's just like this negative momentum started to accumulate in my life, and eventually, after like 9 months, so like maybe the first 3 months were good. The whole sabbatical was maybe 9 months, and then those 6 months of kind of like slug mode, I was actually like the most depressed and unmotivated person I had
Hmm.
ever been in my life. And that's when I started Polygon Academy and went back to work at Tuke. And I can tell you, within like 2, 3 weeks, I was fired up. I was more passionate and kind of like getting back on track. I getting going hard in the gym again. All those kind of things. That positive momentum was coming back into my life. So you really got to kind of audit your own habits, and yeah, me and my buddy Lincoln, we call it slug mode. And slug mode is it can be great. It can feel good for a time, but eventually it's going to catch up with you, and it's actually going to like start taking away from your life. So
Yeah, you can go to full free fall mode with it. I think I'm right now in slug mode, to be honest, because it is like, yeah, back into 2020, it was like, okay, I'm gonna chill on a podcast for a bit. I'm gonna pause on that. And I was doing art session and counterplay. I was like, okay, I'm gonna stop doing counterplay. Sorry, not counterplay. Art Station. And I was like, I'm doing a lot of mentorships. Okay, I'm gonna pause it. I'm just gonna dial back on them too. Oh, this personal project. Okay, I'm gonna chill on that a little bit too. And it's just in full free fall mode. And I all started from missing a part. I up until the point of I think it was September last year. I did 2 full years of not missing a week of the podcast. Even while getting married, I've managed to make sure I had a podcast ready to go out the week I got married. Is like, yeah, I kept my momentum up. As soon as that 1 week slipped, it was like everything just came tumbling down. And I mean, that's not necessarily saying that's a healthy thing.
I
You
mean,
can't be chasing your
everything you
feet.
just listed there is like you were pedal to. So I think
Yeah,
there is the opposite end of
yeah,
the spectrum, and that can lead to burnout, right? So it's
mm-hmm.
it's really developing. It sounds to me like what you've developed is like a lot more self awareness about like spreading yourself too thin. Like you listed like 20 different things, right? Like art station, mentorships, podcasts. Like I think if you're diverting your energy into all of these different avenues, it is easy to kind of get drained. I wouldn't say you're in slug mode, that's for sure. And I think a lot of the population on Earth right now is kind of like I think a lot of
Yes,
people feel like they're in a holding pattern, right? So that we have to definitely take that into account. Because like the last thing I want to do is make students or anyone listening feeling like, oh, I'm not doing 10 different things. Like I'm a piece of shit. I'm lazy. That's not it at all,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's like that attunement to how you're almost like your optimal productivity zone,
mm-hmm.
right? Like you want to keep the engine hot and running, but you don't want to like floor it and like drain the gas tank. But at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to have been like sitting there in an idle where like the engine's just kind of like sputtering, right? So I think a lot of people have their own version of like the peak performance zone
Mm-hmm.
where everything just kind of feels good, and it's easy to over or underextend yourself. But when you find that magic spot, if you can kind of like almost like make mental notes or even in a notebook, jot down like this is what I was doing at the peak times in my life when I felt so good. Go
Mm-hmm.
back to those notes when you're feeling like you're in slug mode and be like, oh yeah, I was doing these couple extra things, or maybe my diet was more on point. I was a little bit more productive. How can I like rev the engine back up to that optimal zone? I think that's just something that you develop over time.
You have to. It's definitely a trial and error thing because I know it. I've always felt like this with burnout. Whenever I hear about burnout, and I'm always like, I'm glad I've gone. I think I've gone through it. I don't really know. It's such a vague, this weird term, but I think I've gone through it probably a couple of times, and I'm glad both times because I know the first time I was like, I knew where my limit was, and then I was like, okay, just stay
Mm-hmm.
away from that limit. And maybe back in the 2020 as a burnout, but I'm like, okay, I was able to do all of these things, and yeah, that led to burnout. I'm like, cool. I know I just dial off like 20-30%, and I'm at a really good point. But it is definitely trial and error things. You're like, and when you go in relax mode or slug mode, it's like, okay, how far is too far? Oh, this feels good. I'm like, I'm still being productive, but I've got a life. Like this feels like
Yeah,
a nice
and
balance.
it also really depends on what your life goals
Mm-hmm.
I have to be the most amazing artist, and that's my only goal in life. Like there's other things you probably have. Like obviously you said you're married, right? So you have like your relationship. You probably have the
Mm-hmm.
goals for that. You have you're probably like personal, financial goals, all that kind of stuff, right? So I mean, different years of your life, you're going to want to focus on different aspects of
Mm-hmm.
of your goals or your life and all that stuff. So I mean, for me, I definitely kind of have a theme for different years of my life, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe you want to take a year and just like get it super super good shape, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to devote all of my free time to becoming an artist because I know my goals are to get like super ripped or something like that. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, it's being more intentional with that stuff. I think
Mm-hmm.
as soon as you kind of like let it slide and just kind of go on autopilot, that's when nothing gets accomplished, right? Like you
Yeah.
just kind of get in that weird middle ground. So it's you almost have to wake up and just be like, what do I want to accomplish this week? What do I want to accomplish this month? And that's kind of cliche, but it is a good way of thinking about it to keep yourself on track. Keeping a little journal or a notebook, that's something I started doing recently. Just writing down how am I feeling, what do I want to get done, like what are the big ideas I want to play around with each year. Because I was watching someone talk about it, and he's like, if I live the same year of my life over and over and over again, that's kind of not only is that boring, but that's almost like a failure. He's like, I want every
Yeah.
year of my life to be different and better and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's re-examining where you're at. I mean, obviously, it's the new year just passed, and that's kind of the common time to do it. But there's no reason you can't do that. April, June, July, just be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, let's re-examine things and kind of get back in touch with my own self, what I want. So,
Yeah, it's my favorite word right now. Well, it always has been. It's always been deliberate. It was the word which was drilled through all of rugby academies. It was the word that was like slammed into us was be deliberate with everything you do. Like If you're like
Hmm.
in a rugby match, and it's like, oh, you like ran out of position. Why did you do that? And I was like, I was tired and I was trying to hide. It's like, well, you were deliberately trying to get out of the way of your duties as a player. And it's
Yeah.
like that transferred into like gym, art. It's like being deliberate. Why am I doing materials for a whole year straight? I'm doing materials for a whole year straight for the reason of being a good materials artist because it was my worst thing and I'm going to make it my strongest thing. Or like you said, being deliberate, like, okay, I'm going to relax and I'm going to take time off. Not because I can't be asked to do my actual tasks, it's because I'm going to be deliberate with what I want to do with my time. And right now,
Yeah.
that's relaxing.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like look at myself over the last, I guess, 9 months. We were working super hard on Godfall, trying to get that. I was moving into the new art director role. So I haven't made any Polygon Academy
Mm-hmm.
content in like the last few months, and that's me deliberately scaling back on that to avoid burning out. Right, like I could continue to try and like pump out videos all the time, but I know in the long run that'll just burn out that whole project. And like I
Mm-hmm.
said, that's something I want to do for the long run. So right now, take a break from that, devote my time and energy into learning this whole new skill set. Managing teams, stuff like that, and this art director role. But now that I've kind of started to get a handle on that, and the game's out the door, and that feels good. So now I'm starting to have a bit more free time. Now it's okay. Now I have the awareness of like, okay, I can probably start to dedicate more time back into that project, and I won't end up becoming horrendously burnt out by trying to work 18 hours a day to do both at the same time, right? So
Yeah, so I want to talk a bit. I want to spend quite a bit of time on that, the art director thing. So
yep,
I want to know before we get into like the actual role in leading up in the X amount of years being in the industry at this point, like what things were you doing leading up to it that you kind of were consciously had this goal in mind? Because I know, like for example, we say about being deliberate. I'm at the moment looking. I know I've spoken to you about it about photography. One day in like 5, 10 years, I aspire to be an art director. And I'm like, okay, photography is going to aid me in that. I'm not a traditional artist. I can't draw or anything like that. Okay, I need to
yeah,
understand cinematography better. I need to understand photography better, lighting. These things will help me one day be a better art director. Even though like right now the day job is like you said, level art, material art, far more like practical things. So in the lead up to you becoming an art director at Counterplay, like what things were you doing as an artist to help prepare you for that role?
yeah. I mean, actually, this kind of ironically loops back to the whole like Polycount thing of like that developing that skill set over even when I was a junior or looking to get into the industry and stuff like that. Developing that, I mean, that's a key part of the art director role is giving feedback, learning how to tactfully communicate with people, right? So I would say that's something, because I always enjoyed doing that. That was definitely an element that I was aware would be part of the role. Also, as I kind of progressed through my career over the last few years of going from, say, like a level artist, or even the beginning of like creating props and pieces of the environment, to going to a level artist, you're focused more on the macro, the big picture, right? Like larger world composition, how things look as a whole. I don't really care about like the little tiny scratches on that garbage can, but how does the entire environment look? And then kind of taking that a step further into like lighting art, which is literally like refining the composition, the colors, the whole look of basically what's on screen. So that's even more in the macro, right? Because you're basically painting on top of what the level artists are doing and trying to make their work look as good as possible. And so those two roles go really synergistically. So I was always kind of just stepping towards the macro and the big picture throughout my career, and then kind of pairing that with my natural, I guess, tendency to try and teach and mentor and give feedback and stuff like that. So it kind of it's a nice sweet spot. I think with those skill sets kind of came together. I kind of joke that I'm actually kind of colorblind. So I'm a colorblind art director who can't draw. Like I cannot paint concept art or anything like that for the life of me. And I've the nice thing about this is I've actually met various styles of art directors
Mm-hmm.
throughout my career. Right, like I've met another lighting arts art director who would literally just draw scribbles on a notepad and be like, okay, a missile flies into a building, massive explosion, and it's like it looks like a kid's drawing, but he can also communicate it with reference and stuff like that. And then I've also met art directors that are just badass concept artists, and they can draw the coolest stuff, but they have very little experience on the like the 3D production side of things, so they don't have the context of like how long is it going to actually take to make this,
Mm-hmm.
or make this feasible and get the game out the door, right? So there's two opposite ends of the spectrum, and I would say I'm more along these sides of like a production art director, where I have a more of an awareness of like what goes into actually creating the 3D assets and stuff in the game, and then I hopefully have developed an eye for like what looks good and that allows me to rely on, an amazing concept art team or other people to like, hey, here's some ideas. Okay, cool. How do we fuse these together? And more of like decision making and stuff like that too, which is a very important part of the role, right? Is being able to kind of consistently make decisions and choose, okay, I want this or not this, and this more towards this and stuff like that. So for me, that was an interesting experience. Is especially becoming on the more decisive, more um, you know utilizing other people's skill sets other than just my own to help achieve a bigger. I hate the word like vision because it sounds so pretentious, but like
Yeah.
a bigger, uh, look of the game. Right? Is I really want to rely on people that we hire because we try and hire the best people that we can. Right? So that's comes down to another part of my skill set is having the input in the hiring process because I know if I do my job well there,
Mm.
then their performance is really going to help me do my job in the long run better, right? Because they're going to come up with cool ideas that'll help me design the world and stuff like that, and they're going to be able to. If I know they can take direction well, their personality is good, we're going to work better together, and that's going to pay off. 'Cause things are just going to be more cohesive as a whole, right?
How do you, but as a production artist, because obviously you've created like great art yourself, was it weird sort of I noticed this at a previous role when I stepped into a leadership role, it's kind of like it's hard to not do, even though you might have the answer, like I know what I
Hmm.
want to do, I know what's probably gonna look best, I've already experimented this and know what will work, but you don't want to just give them all the
Yeah, yeah,
answers or tell them what to do. And I know we have a good relationship with this in the past where you're like, hey, like, okay, you're not gonna tell me exactly what to do, but you'll be like, I think this, like, have you thought about trying this and maybe just a bit of that, and like you're pushing me in the direction, but you're not hands on with
yeah.
it. Is that a hard adjustment period?
It's not really, because I mean, for me, I always liked it when people kind of like you said, nudged or guided in the right direction. Creative people can come up with, because sometimes you guys come up with like way more badass things than even I could have. Like, oh, if I make it kind of like this other reference, but you guys come up with something that's super cool, right? Um, the a hard part for me was learning to step back and let other people do it, especially when there's like the little noodly things. I'm like, oh, I could fix that myself. It would take like 2 minutes. But if I don't give you guys the direction and feedback to learn how to fix those things or to spot those common mistakes that kind of keep happening over and over again, it's not really going to benefit you guys in the long run, which is not going to benefit me in the long run, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
going to have to consistently keep doing like, oh man, if I know this person's weak point is this, I'll just fix it myself. Like it's your first instinct, because especially coming from a production background, like I can just open the editor, I can change the lighting, I can just move things around in the world and do that. But that creates a weak link in the chain, right? And we're trying to build like a strong team that is good for multiple productions and stuff like that, right? So I want you guys to advance and develop as artists. So that's, and like that goes back to hiring. Like if I hire good creative people, I'm more than happy to have their input, and then also just kind of like nudge it a little bit this way, nudge it a little bit that way. It looks awesome. It's feasibly done on time. It's cool. Because I mean, a lot of people, like I said, will have this big grand vision for something, but when it comes down to brass tacks of, can we actually accomplish this
Hmm.
in like, oh, we have like 3 months to make this map, can we do this, all of this crazily unique, bizarre designs and stuff like that, or should we rely on more like, okay, we have a really good kit, we can rely on the lighting, it can come together really well, the gameplay feels good in the space. Those are the more important things, rather than being like, I totally designed it myself and my ego is amazing, I feel so good. Like, no, it's a team project, right? Like, I'm more than happy to work with people and kind of find like the sweet spot middle ground. And for me, that it did take a little bit of learning to kind of be like, step back and let people really function. But as soon as I kind of like decided with that mindset, I think it's good for the vibe on the team, obviously, because you're not like micromanaging everyone's little decisions. Like, move that rock. It's like that little classic art director comment: move that rock to the left, a little bit more to the right, like standing over the shoulder. I hate that stuff, especially because I encountered it in the past being a level artist, right? Like that whole like micromanaging kind of like, okay, we need it to be exactly like this, when it really, if it's 10% different, like it doesn't really matter. The player's never going to know anyways, right? Like, as long as it looks good and the end result plays good, then it doesn't matter if it's like hyperly to my exact specifications. Like I said, and you guys usually come up with stuff that works amazingly well right off the bat, anyway. So
It's funny. I still remember now. The games I would probably say this is. I remember a bit when I was working on Air and I was doing routes. I would spend 2 days doing routes, and I was like super obsessed with like making sure these roads look good. and you're like, if you like, you play through bit, and you're like, okay, I know you're still working on that bit. I literally had to look out my way, like up to like almost directly up to look at them routes. The player's not seeing that. The only person you're doing that for is you, and I'm like, oh shit, maybe I should spend some less time on these routes and sort of like left them where they were. I mean, that's one of the things which was it was I want to say being brought down back down to earth, but it's kind of like, oh shit, yeah, we do a lot of these little like level art when you're stuck in level art on a map for like long periods of time. You kind of over detailed.
You get the
From a
force
sense of
blinders.
yeah, and you kind of just go, oh
Yeah.
man, it pained me because I both of us played through Godfall. I know we're playing some Tower Trials on Godfall, and you're like, I didn't stop and look at a single thing. Like everything was a blur to me because I'm just flying around that map, and I'm like, oh yeah, weird. The player does not see the little crack detail I put on the bottom of that pillar or the little bit of dust I put down at the bottom of that vase. Like it doesn't come through. Like everything's a blur when
Yeah.
you're
I
playing
mean,
it.
that stuff, it does add up for like, I think, like I always have the classic example of like the independently rotated screws on like the base of a garbage can. It's like, and then I literally want to make a video where I show that, and then I show how people play Call of Duty, and it's just like 60 frames a second, blazing through the level, cameras rotating, things are exploding, and it's like, did you notice even the color of that garbage can? Like, no. But I mean, it's that fine line, right? Like, you want the creative satisfaction of detailing and arting up an area because it's fun, right? Like, you want to enjoy your job, and it's once you get in that flow state in the zone, it can be easy to fall into that like over detailing a corner. But that's if that gives you like added morale to your job. Like the amount of times
Mm.
that you with Lincoln, like he'll be working on something and he'll show me, he's like, dude, check this out. Like I spent like a couple hours on this and it looks dope. And is like, yeah, you could have spent, a couple hours working on the whole map. But if you got that nice momentum boost up, okay, now cool, go apply that positive. Like if you're feeling happy, you're gonna want to continue working on your map and stuff like that too, right? So there's that fine line.
Mm.
And that's something that really is, especially as a junior, it's easy to fall into.
Mm.
You'll learn more over time of like, okay, cool, I've got 2 weeks to do this, and I don't want to work like 40 hours of overtime, so I'm really going to prioritize, right?
Yeah.
Hit all the big picture stuff first, and then I can spend as much little noodly extra hours as I want on
Yeah.
that stuff because I'm not like the classic example, the super detailed corner, the gray box rest of the map, right? And that's a bad trap to fall into. But I'm not necessarily saying you were doing that, but it was like the whole map kind of being fleshed out. But you're, yeah, they're roots, right? Like, okay,
Yeah.
this cool
Up on the top of a
architectural
cliff as
corner is
well.
going to, yeah, like the cool architectural corner. Like, if you invest time in that, it's going to pay off. And you're like, oh, good, cool. I'm going to go. Now that those props are back from outsourcing, I'm going to go, do
Mm.
that up, and it has a bigger like visual impact, right? So it's always kind of asking yourself, like, where is the most bang for my buck going to come from? But at the same time, we're all human and we get stuck in that loop of like, yeah, man, that crack decal I placed on that pillar is the shit. It's so cool. And then you see like the YouTube streamers running past it, and you're like, what? They didn't comment on that? Like,
Yeah, I remember doing it on Sunforge. I was like, we got one of the first bits I got to work on when I joined. It was like it was doing the detail pass on a bunch of stuff, and it's like, oh, I get to put the decals down. It's like, oh, look how sick that decal looks, and I've got this foliage, frames it up super nice composition. All the YouTube stuff I saw to play through, not a single person even ran the way I thought they would, which would like frame up that composition. No one even saw it. I even when I played, I didn't. I forgot about it. I completely forgot about that detail. So I've ran past it. Is the big spinny ramp up onto the end of Sunforge. Did
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Got and I was like that. I put some like really nice cracked decals. And I didn't even look back. I completely forgot about it. And I remember finishing the map and like shit, I couldn't get back. I did something
Yeah.
that. Oh, okay. I guess I missed it. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
if
But
I
I
missed
mean,
it, everyone
it's
does.
it's all habits that we all fall,
Mm.
right? So it's only human. It shows that you're, which is it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like I said, if you have fun doing that stuff and it keeps you in a really positive, happy like mindset of being proud of your work, like that. Anytime I've worked on something that I'm proud of, I'm gonna put in way more effort and
Mm.
enjoy the process rather than like any project I've kind of half-assed it or something like that. I'm just like, oh man, like I just want to get this done out of the way. Like the results on those two vibes and mindsets are vastly different. So that's why I'm sometimes hesitant to kind of nudge people. Okay, like time to move on. But sometimes like that's part of my job now, right? Is like, okay,
Yeah.
cool. Like I think you got that recipe down pat. Like go apply that to the rest of the map, and like let's make sure that we hit our macro schedule goals as well, right? So
What about So like, as for the art director role, was there anything that not blindsided you, but like you knew you still needed to work on, or you probably didn't expect to be as much of a challenge as it was for this particular this particular role?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was definitely like an eye opener to just the entire scope of a game. Because usually, as a level artist, app or one art set, right? But trying to have all of that kind of cohesively gel together, like what three? We had like 3 or 4 different biomes, bunch of different like texture sets, bunch of different modular kits, and being like, okay, I need to have something that kind of like connects some of this together in some way, shape, or form, along with a tight schedule and stuff like that, right? So it's really having that like 1,000 foot view, and like as a say a senior world artist, you'll have a pretty zoomed out, like technically zoomed out view of part of the game, but you don't have a lot more awareness of like the overall thing, right? And trying to make something that, um, from a production standpoint, stuff that's being made for maybe one biome can be used in another, and just having that like larger thing and trying to keep all of that straight in your head is definitely a mind bender, as well as like the I guess the higher up the chain you go, the more your day is dominated by meetings and soft
Mm-hmm.
skills and interpersonal communication and stuff like that, right? So people sometimes assume, oh, an art director, they just sit and paint at their desk all day. They give out concepts or references and stuff like that, and that's it. But like a lot of my time is actually spent, uh, talking about the health of the team. Okay, where are our weaknesses from the environment team? Like, who do we need to hire to maybe cover this skill set? Or, oh, hey, how can we this person's struggling with this, can we maybe swap them onto a different zone with another artist that is more comfortable with this kind of stuff, and just all of that big picture stuff that also has to get done during the day, while you're also trying to like have this cohesive look to a game, and give feedback and all that kind of stuff at the same time. So it's definitely uh, I definitely had to spread my skill set wider, and that also kind of comes back to relying on other people to do their job. So damn well better make sure we're hiring good people, because the more you can rely on other people, they're gonna probably get a sense of satisfaction, like, oh wow, like I did something, I tackled something, and it made the art director happy and all that stuff. That's great. At the same time, that's like the only way that we can get the game done is by relying on people to contribute and pull their weight, while just kind of not being a dictator at the same time, right? So I want my main goal is, when I'm, I guess, helping to lead and manage the environment art team, is I want people to be happy and enjoy what they're working on. So because I know that's going to deliver the results, which is technically the end point of my job, right? Is to deliver good looking environments. But the way to do that is by investing in the people on the team and making sure everyone's happy, no one's too stressed out and stuff like that. So that's a whole another aspect to this kind of leadership role that a lot of people don't think about, right? They think they're going to be out in their ivory tower leading the ship, just dictating things. And for me, sometimes it's taking that extra 10, 15 minutes to hop on a quick call with somebody, like, hey man, like how are you actually doing? Like, is everything going okay in your life? Is there anything coming up that you would really want to work on? What are you passionate about? Where do you want to develop your skill sets over the next coming years? Is taking that time to invest in those interpersonal relationships is going to pay off massively, just in terms of team health and stuff like that, which is important, because I mean, you hear a lot of horror stories in games, right? Of just people that are just grinding it out, and
Mm-hmm.
that's for me. That's always kind of been the thing. Like, I will happily make some artistic sacrifices uh, to have a stronger, healthier team. And that was one of the things we kind of came up with, is if we can cut something early and it's going to be a smart decision, it's going to make people's lives easier. Players won't even notice it because they never know it existed. But the other stuff is going to look better and stuff, as well as, like, that's just a huge win to me. So it's those kind of tactical decisions that kind of come into play as well. And just again, looking at the production from a way more zoomed out perspective. So it was quite the interesting learning experience of like this whole swirling of all these things that you don't even really think about as a when I was like a level artist or a lighter. I never thought about, oh, schedules and stuff like that, and
Mm-hmm.
oh, what are we going to be doing for like 6 months from now, and how are we going to map that and Lego piece it all together. So
Yeah, and it's I've
eye
imagined
opening.
it's crazy as well, like because you plan out these Lego pieces, and it turns out one or two of the Lego pieces don't quite fit into their space, so you have to move everything along one, and then that Lego piece don't fit. And it's like, okay, now we're gonna like fix all this stuff. Like it's the sort of stuff I don't envy as well. Having people like Mateo, like really good producers, I
Yeah,
don't
that's
envy
exactly
them
what I was about to
guys.
say. Is like it also gave me a lot more of working with producers, because I mean, I think as a junior artist or something, you're like, what do producers actually do? But like when you work with a good producer, and like we have some really good ones on our team, they make your life easier. Because as much as I'm dealing with like, oh, what's the team health like? Okay, I'm giving input into the scheduling. They're the ones at the super high level, like really building the Lego pieces all together, right?
Mm,
And like I try and help them out as much as I can, but like their day is even more meetings and stuff. I still get
yeah.
to play with some of the fun art stuff to me. So that's the stuff that you know, obviously I enjoy doing. But I know they work super hard to make everyone's life easier, and you know, for the entire production to run smoothly. So I got a bit of a peek into that, and it's something that I'm like, wow, I'm really appreciative that the higher up my career path I've gone, the more like importance I've kind of given to like a really good producer on the team, which is yeah, they'll bend over backwards for us, which is amazing.
Yeah, I've had the good pleasure of working with some great producers in the past, and I've had the pleasure to learn from working with well, not bad producers, but producers who maybe were inexperienced. And it's like you learn to, when you feel like you have a good producer, you're like, okay, I'm in a very lucky situation. This next production is going to be I'm a very lucky boy to have these guys, the ones planning shit. Um, but one thing with like the team health and stuff, how have you found? Because like, yeah, I know everyone's working remote right now because of COVID, but even before COVID, like Counterplay is a remote studio.
Hmm.
Um, how have you found all that? Because I know you've obviously worked in-house at studios for your whole career. Like at this point now, you're managing a team remotely, and we're all over the place. We have some people in Australia, we have some people in like Spain, me in the UK, there's some people in the Netherlands, the US. Like we're everywhere. Have you found that?
It definitely adds a layer of challenge, not only just the remote thing, but the different. So for us, we're in kind of a different. Say, I know a lot of people in Montreal right now. Say Ubisoft, they're working remotely, but they're all in Montreal, right? So their time zone. Most people will work there like 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 or whatever in Montreal. But for us, our challenge is finding those overlaps, like key meeting times. Like we have those group reviews, right? So I'm like,
Mm.
okay, here's 5 different time zones. Where's an hour that overlap? And it's almost like that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where he sticks the gem on the stick, and like the
Yeah.
sun comes through and it beams to the spot on the floor. It's like that. It's like, okay, where's that beam pointing at that 1 hour where we can get everyone together? So that it is challenging, but it is, you know, once you kind of set that foundation in place, like it took me a while to figure out in the beginning, like different meeting slots. Once you have that, it is kind of like everyone's daily routine, right? Like someone might be in a different time zone. So I know like some members of our team like work more in the evening and night. Some people get up earlier. So there is kind of like our core overlap hours,
Mm.
which is great. Um, and then the more autonomous the job, so like someone doing level art and stuff, they might only need to overlap a couple times a week, right? So we have our every couple days we have a, you know, like a show and tell and review and stuff like that. But for the rest of the, you know, the other few days they can work more autonomously, whereas I think for someone like me where I'm kind of plugged into all these other departments, I kind of have to be more, you know, I'm in more meetings with different time zones, so it's that part's a bit more challenging. So I would say if you want to be a remote artist, being like more on the production side of things where, you know, you're building props and environments and stuff, that's probably going to be easier. um, I again to go back to producers who have to talk to like so many different aspects of the
Mm.
development team, like they, you know, the millions of time zones they have to deal with is probably crazy. um, yeah, so I would say the biggest thing is the scattered time zone kind of nature, but I think everyone's been pretty good about it. Everyone's like, I know you kind of stay up late sometimes, you're happy to hop into calls and give your 2 cents or show your work and stuff like that, which is awesome. But I think that's also something that comes with like, I guess you could say like the privilege of working remotely
Yeah.
and the benefit of having that flexibility. Like that's something I'll gladly do. I'll gladly shuffle my schedule around to be able to get up, work in my pajamas, you know, be like, oh man, I'm gonna go to the gym for like an hour and a half in the middle of my day, and not have someone sitting in a studio being like, we were like 15 minutes late for your lunch, man. Like, I think one of the things again comes back to hiring. Like, we hire people that we trust them to autonomously manage their time and not have to handle it. If you don't trust someone to kind of get their work done, uh, and not have to be like looking at them and see if they're at their desk, like why would you even hire that person at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, so for me, I make sure I hire people I know I can trust to work well, and I like to give people that autonomy. It's like it's a privilege until you mess it up, and then that's maybe when you have to have some like hard conversations. But so far, it's been, you know, I think the philosophy of the studio about hiring really passionate, talented people, we haven't had to have anything like that, right? So
I mean, to be fair, I this whole like the, you know, the manager watching over your shoulder. I don't think you could do it in this industry. Like, I mean, you know what's like. Okay, Alex, you have this particular level. You have 6 days on it. Cool. I can't like skimp out and not do my job on it because the proof's in the pudding. You'll be like, dude, this six. This is you've literally moved a few bricks. Like you've had 6 days on this. What the fuck are you doing? I mean, in some admin jobs, like if repetitive call centers or something, I imagine you can easily
Yeah,
waste
you can
time and
hide and you
hide.
can coast, right?
Yeah, and you
Um,
can't do that in this industry because the proof's in your pudding. You're having to produce something, and there's no
yeah,
hiding. It happens once you're screwed. Like you've completely
yeah,
shown,
for
you've
sure.
shown
I
your
mean,
ass.
there's the tools out there now, obviously with Discord, where I mean, I remember when I was in studio, stay at like whatever, I would literally spend 80% of my time with my headphones on, just working at my desk, right? Like, so there wasn't necessarily that necessity for me to be in the studio in the first place. Like, yeah, there was some, there's meetings, but we have all of our meetings remotely now, so that's not much of a difference. The one
Mhm.
thing I do miss is like going out for lunch and stuff with the people. So
Yes.
for me, an ideal mix would be, if I was working at a big studio like Ubisoft or WB or whatever, say I was to go back to something like that, it would be to have the option to work remotely, right? Because I think for me now, the genie's out of the bottle. Like people are going to
Yeah.
get so used to this the last year, maybe even the next year, right? Like working remotely, like there's people that love it, there's people that are like, indifferent, that like kind of hate it, right? So I think in order to be competitive, and this kind of goes into what the whole philosophy of our remote studio in the beginning of like with Counterplay being fully remote is, we can hire people in different countries and not have to deal with that kind of like, oh well, we need to get them a work visa to bring them
Yeah.
over. Like we can hire them to work remotely with us. We can hire really good talent, which means we can poach really good talent. So if the other big voice studios are going to want to remain competitive, they're going to have to offer something that can compete with that. They're either going to have to like raise salaries like crazy. They're going to have to, probably offer remote work as an option, because if all of their talent is getting poached by, I think the remote work lifestyle is something that's going to be really embraced by right away. Obviously, right now, indies, medium-sized studios, like the whole global remote kind of thing, right? Like obviously, every studio out there right now is local remote work is fine, but I think there's going to be this whole like, all right, let's get everyone back in the studio and claw people back in.
Mm.
So I think if they don't at least offer the option, there's going to be an exodus. You see this every now and then. There's like phases to the industry where studios get really big, then they kind of fracture, and there's a bunch of like small to medium studios that kind of get spawned. I think you'll kind of see that kind of cycle in this industry over the next couple of years, of like the people that want to work fully remote, they're going to have options, and they're not going to want to go back into the office, right? uh, and then there's going to be people that want to really work in studios and collab together in person, and like they can go work at their local studio and stuff like that too. So but I think it is a big competitive advantage for us to be able to really just hire talented people and be like, cool, you're in Australia, you're in Spain, like let's work out a deal and join us remotely. That's what part of the reason why I joined the studio in the first place, even before COVID, right? Like I was
Mm.
like, oh man, I always wanted to work from home. My time is becoming more valuable. Trying to do Polygon Academy and all that stuff, and sitting for 2 hours on the metro every day is like, if I value my time at like, let's just say like I value my time at like $100 an hour, that's $200 lost spent on
Yeah.
commuting, right? Like, so it's kind of crazy. So I think that comes down to it too, is right, people are just really going to want to be having their life on their terms, especially after like this year that we've had, right? When things kind of go back to normal or whatever.
That's
It's
a good way
yeah,
of phrasing it,
it's a
dude.
big deal.
Life, it's like life on your terms, like because I mean I know for me I'm a very sociable person. Everyone, all of my friends are always in my colleagues, and obviously with COVID right now we haven't been able to travel, so it's like okay, cool, like I am a sociable person. I spend all day on Discord anyway with like guys who are working too, and I know that okay, if I'm not in the studio with people, I'm gonna have to make a conscious effort to go visit people on the weekends just to make sure I'm getting out and interacting with human beings face to face, because that's one thing I realized I'm bad at recently is while going out shooting like there's a photography, I met a guy on who I met on Instagram, and I was speaking to him and I was just like shit, I took a hold of the conversation with anyone other than my wife and my mother, and I was like oh shit, we need to get back in these habits again. But I think there's something, and with the like whole global working remote, I think working at our station, they had a really good system because they have a office in Krakow, um, and their office in Montreal, and they have like a
Hmm.
couple of summits a year. So they have a summer and a winter one, and basically like they all gather in one place, and it's like, okay, we're gonna bring the two offices together because some people work remote. I was one of them. We were meant to have a summit, but yeah, obviously COVID. And it's like, okay, we get it. There are downsides to remote work, and we're going to counteract that by making sure that you at least get to see each other and, do whatever you do, team bonding or, just even going out for a
Yeah.
drink and seeing each other at key meetings. I know they had like their key summits during them times. These like small little things are kind of what I think the industry is going to turn into over the coming years. Like I said, the genie's out of the bottle at this point. And now you've said it, like the living life in your own terms is a really good way of phrasing it. Cause like, I mean, for me right now, I'll get up about 8:30, walk the dogs, go for a walk or whatever, or gym when it opens again. Start work, make sure I've got left enough time for meetings, or if I know I've got meetings in the afternoon, I might finish a bit early and then like come back in for the meetings. And I can just do what essentially what I want is as long as the stuff gets done, the hours get done, work gets done, and I'm available when I'm meant to be available. It's very good, but like you said as well, it's a privilege to be able to work like this. So there is give and take. If someone says, okay, we've got a meeting at 6 o'clock in the evening for you, it's like, okay, you know what? Yeah, I will go on my way to do that because I get the privilege to sit in pajamas all day and I keep my dogs keep me company. It's like, yeah, I'm lucky. Like this is a good thing. So yeah, I have to give back as well. Which is it. I don't know why that's not been spoken about a great deal. I think a lot of people not to bag on people being entitled or anything, but it's like they want everything to be perfect, and it's kind of like, look, remote work isn't perfect. There are some downsides, and you have to compromise. It is a give and a take. Yes, you can get up and stay in your pajamas all day. You might need to attend a meeting sometimes in the evening. Like,
Yeah.
sorry, it's one of them. But that's not mentioned very much, actually, funny enough, in a lot of conversations I have
I
online.
think people also are still really like mind of like the workday, right? Of like 9 to 5. So
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I'm gonna get up. But when you start, especially in our situation, when you start to work like remotely with multiple time zones, yeah, you have the key overlap, but you can start to design your day in a better way.
Yeah.
Like sitting at your desk for a block of 6 to 8 hours, like by that sixth, seventh hour, you're not operating super well, right? You're probably like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, So like for me, I find breaking up my day into like blocks of like 2 hours here, 2 3 hours here, go to the gym, another 2 3 hours, go have dinner, sit down and noodle on some of that, like open up the editor and maybe do some like last minute work or something like that, and it just gives me those periods of refreshment because I don't feel like I have to be locked in place for 8 hours, putting in my time so my manager sees me at my desk, like that kind of mindset, right? It's like, no, I trust myself to get done what needs to be done on time. And I'm an adult, so I can manage my time in ways that I see fit, right? Like, uh, and to me, that's been a big thing is like just really changing my lifestyle and changing the way that I think about things. Because it might be like, halfway through the week and I have like something I got to go do. Oh, maybe I got to just run and go get groceries. I don't want to go to the grocery store at 6 o'clock when it's like peak hours, and
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'm gonna, you know what? I'll just send a message to someone if I need to, miss something or whatever, or be like, all right, I'm just gonna go grab some groceries. I'll be back, and it gives you a lot more flexibility. And then you're like, oh, this is actually making my life easier because I
Mm-hmm.
can, like you said, live my life on my own terms, and kind of just play with the Lego pieces of my schedule. And for me, it's been a bit nice, big positive boost in terms of like my own morale, how I perceive my life. I feel more in control of like my day to day, which is kind of, I guess, maybe a weird thing to say, but I think it's such a break from the norm of like just that daily cycle of like going into an office, having lunch, going back to work, going home, like usually commuting both ways, like being able to shake it up and just have another option is very like invigorating for me.
Yeah, I have to admit that route. It's weird because although I do like routine, it's just the fact you get to choose your own. Because I know for me, what my routine used to be like when I was at Live 5, it was like hour and a half commute. I got up at 5:30 every morning, hour and a half commute to get
Oh,
into the office. Yeah, hour and a half drive to get into the office. Because basically, I wanted to like get in as early as possible because they had like full flexi time. So I would leave the office at 2 p.m. every day, going to beat
mhm.
traffic. Hour and a half in, hour and a half back. And then I was working in deco at the same time as well, so I could do deco work. But I remember that was like that them drives, man. Like there's a couple of times when like I was so tired. And I was like, I'd stray and hit the paint on the motorway, and I'm like, okay, that's woke me up again. Okay, that, and I was like, this is not healthy. And I had 2 days working from home. They were like, oh, 3 days in, 2 days working from home, and that was actually worse. Like because I never got into any sense of routine because it's like the day I was working from home varied from week to week. So it was always like, okay, what 2 days am I going to be working from home this week? This day and this day. Okay, it's them 2 days, and then these 3 days I'm going in. And that lack of like macro routine was super weird for me. Like my like general mood over that time, even though the work was great, like the work was really fun that we were doing, it was like my macro mood was really weird. Like whereas now, even though technically it's more fluctuating, it's completely dictated by me. Like okay, this block of time in the mornings is for dog walking and gym. This block of time is
Yeah.
for lunch or going for another walk or photography or whatever I want to do. It's like that set routine, but it's not a routine, is way better for just regulating my whole like rhythm of my life.
Yeah, I think like this whole like one of the few positives of the fact that it forced most like 99% of studios to actually suddenly figure out the remote work thing has exposed a lot of like those myths that I think a lot of studios were using to like stop people from working from home. Like, oh, the lack of security, the game's going to get leaked. I don't think I've seen a single
Nope.
like big game get leaked. Like the next Assassin's Creed isn't out like on torrent sites or anything like that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so that was instantly, that was, people still have a reputation. If you leak a game, regardless if you work in the studio or at home, like you're just burning your entire career. And I don't think 99.9999% of people are ever going to want to do that. Right. So that kind of removes that excuse. The whole excuse of like, oh, well, if we can't see people, are they going to be working? That's kind of thrown out the window. Games are still getting done and produced. And again, that goes back to why would you, if you even have the sense that you have to micromanage or not trust someone to do the job because they're, I don't know, just riding the paycheck or not passionate about what they're doing or like they're just gonna skive off or whatever. Like, why would you hire them in the first place? So I think it's probably made hiring practices different, but also it's allowed people to kind of adapt to that and probably again secure talent that they haven't wouldn't have been able to in the past. For me, I think it's exposed a lot of the myths, and
Yeah.
that's why I say the genie is going to be hard to get back in the bottle because some studios are probably going to try and pull that stuff. We need to up our security again. It's like, well, nothing went wrong for the last 2 years. Like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that was actually so that I found that hilarious because so I was working with you guys for about a month and a half before like COVID was like okay lockdown, and lockdown came in. I was like, what the fuck's gonna happen to the games industry? Like, because like I have friends at Ubisoft that's like it's super like nope, can never work from home, you can never work remote because you need like VPNs and this and this and this. And I was like,
Within like a week,
yeah, that was
a
what got
week.
me. I was like, with zero planning, with zero preparation, they managed to turn around a fully on-site remote force to be fully remote. I
Yeah.
was like, okay, that's with zero prep or foresight or anything like that.
Yeah,
I'm
what
like,
happens when
okay,
you actually spend like a couple weeks to put systems in place?
yes,
Now like the groundwork is done. So if you can, I don't know. I think the way that the world has been advancing, like, even just like platforms like Slack and stuff starting to pop up just to facilitate that for other industries. It's like you can either try and fight against it or you can fully embrace it and
mm-hmm.
figure out how to just pivot and use it to your advantage, right? And yeah, I mean, there's going to be big dinosaur companies that are like fighting tooth and nail just to try and retain some form of control. Uh, when in reality, like this is the way the world has been moving for like the last, I don't know, 10 years, right? Like you look at the whole like digital nomad movement that was really kind of like popular on YouTube documentaries like the last few years. It's like people working on a beach, blah blah blah. And like, yeah, I mean, I think we do have a member of the team that literally almost does that, right? But
Yeah,
it's like it's just more of like people want that independence and the ability to choose, right? So um yeah, you can try and fight it, but this is the way that the world is moving. Like people consume media differently. It's just you have to adapt to the times, right? Like movie theaters, even
mm,
before COVID, like most people you talk to, they're like, I just want to sit on my couch, watch I have a big TV, be able to pause the movie, talk to my friends. Like there's just the way people consume media is completely changing. Even like platforms like the Xbox Game Pass, people are
yes,
consuming their games differently, right? Like I can pay $20 a month and have access to this library of games. Like people's behavior changed because of Netflix, right? Like everything's going digital. So like you can try and fight that the way things are going in the world, but there's always clear indicators of the way things will be 5 years from now, just based on looking at
Mm.
my own behavior, right? Like I don't buy physical media anymore,
Yeah.
like games, DVDs, and stuff. I just buy it all digitally. And I could see, like, you can look at like GameStop's business model, all that stuff. They didn't really look at where the ball was going, and now they're like,
Yeah.
okay, what do we do to pivot? And I mean, game studios, they can fall victim to that exact same thing, right? So it
Do
could be
you?
an opportunity, or it could be you know, a death blow almost
I think some
to ignore what's
studios
going on.
like. I think some studios will. I mean, they're going 100%. There are going to be the dinosaur studios who will fall back into okay, everyone house. I think some studios use it as a what's the word? Not prestige thing, but like okay, it's really hard to get even in. Okay, let's take the US for example. Like a lot of the LA
Hmm.
based studios, it is super hard to even be applicable for that role because you need visas and like it has to be a special type of visa, which is even harder to get. And it's like that kind of automatically filters out a lot of people who maybe aren't their whole heart isn't in it. Yeah, the people who go through
Hmm.
that whole process to try and get into a studio in the LA, it's kind of like okay, they're clearly already like all in on this, and they're probably going to be very good artists for that because they're just so committed to it. I think some studios are going to probably try to fall back into that because it is a fairly although maybe not be ideal for the artist, but to the studio, it's a great way to filter talent. Like, okay, this person can't even apply without even having a visa. All right, well, that's going to filter out 90% of the people who wouldn't make the cut anyway. I could see studios falling back. Mainly in the US, I'm referring to because in the UK and EU, and even Canada, it's far easier to come and work in them countries.
Yeah.
But I can see a lot of the LA based studios being like, okay, no, let's get people back in the office because this office is one of our big selling points and big components to the culture of our studio.
Yeah. I mean, yes. For me, it's layers of diversity, right? Like the amount of good artists that I know that don't have a degree, that aren't eligible for a visa,
Yeah,
that would benefit those studios is crazy. Like for me, I think your portfolio shows if you're committed or not, right? And from a hiring standpoint, as if I was owning a game studio, I would just want to hire the most passionate, like talented people I could. And I mean, yeah, the whole prestige thing, I guess there is an element to that. But at the end of the day, 10 years down the road, it comes down to making awesome games that sell and make your studio money. I want the best people in place for the job. I don't care where they are. Like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, I want passionate, talented people. I don't care where they are as long as they're contributing uh, to the project. Like, that's awesome. It's gonna increase the potential for game sales and stuff like that. Like, for every dope ass artist you hire, like the game's only gonna look better and better and better, which is gonna definitely impact sales. Like people like to say, oh, it's not the graphics that sell the game. It definitely does. Like,
Yeah.
visuals are used in marketing all the time, right? Obviously the games have to be good, get good reviews, but like every little department is adding their, 5% to the pie. And the stronger of each department, your overall pie is going to be better, right? So
You know what? That rule transcends like into nearly every type of games. Like when I was working in iGaming, which is essentially gambling games, slots, it was like, okay, we need really good art because no one even clicks on our game unless the art's good. You need really good design so that people understand what the fuck they're doing. And you need really good is maths. Maths drove everything to do with gambling games. It's like good art makes people click the game, good design helps them understand it, good maths makes them keep coming back for more and more and more. And it's like yeah, you just that whole thing, like you're right. You get more the art. It's actually a weird balance. Actually, I hate this conversation. I've had this conversation a million times. Actually, it's like oh, it wasn't because I've seen it so cute pop up recently. Oh, the most important role in a game studio is QA, and I'm like, okay, this whole most important role thing is fucking stupid. Like they did it in rugby. It'll be like, oh yeah, who's the most important player, the prop or the fly half? And I'm like, you can't have a team without either of them. Like they both are completely different creatures who do different jobs. Like
yeah,
stop doing
it's
this.
all essential cogs in like the cogs in the machine, air
Yeah.
quotes. But the better and the stronger of each department is, like it's only stronger as a whole, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a team. Like you try to eliminate like any weak links and have a really like chain of people that are all kind of moving in the same direction, right? And I mean that's what it's all about. So I think every department is absolutely critical for different elements of a game's success, right? And I mean, there's prime examples of games that have amazing art, terrible gameplay,
Yeah.
amazingly fun games that are like people are like, why don't more people play this game? Like it's so fun. But it's like, yeah, it looks kind of terrible. Like I
Hmm.
don't know. But you see like really good games that are have all of that stuff kind of come together. So for me, it's I wouldn't discount anyone's role on the team. Based on their department for sure. And like for us, again, being remote, I don't interact with every single department all the time, but I'm always excited and stoked to see random different things from different departments. It's super cool, and so it's a nice reminder of like, oh yeah, a game is made by like there's all of this stuff going on in the background that I'm not even aware of, right? And it's I find early on in my career, it was easy to lose track of that and just be like, no, the environment department's the best. Like that's that.
Yeah.
Ironically, that's where I work, so it must be the best. It's the most important thing. Now I'm like, man, like I just want to work with awesome, cool people that are talented and passionate about what they're doing, so I can focus on what I'm doing. And then if
Mm.
we can give each other the least amount of headaches as possible by actually knowing what we're doing, that's the best recipe of all, right? Like it makes your day to day so much easier.
Legit, actually, you know what? If you being the person that gives your surrounding team and different teams the least amount of headaches, you actually probably are gonna make your day better because A, they're not coming to you with a million bugs which you've created because you've been a pain in the ass or been lazy with something, and B, it's like you just if you're not creating other people, making headaches for other people, they're probably not making headaches for you, which is it's a win-win both sides. You mentioned looking back, we've been going now for God, this is this is the longest one I've done in a while. Hour 20. So for 2021, I mean 20. Yeah, I do not want to look back right now. Like 2020 is gone. Hopefully, never hear. Actually, speaking of which, I watched a really funny thing yesterday. This came to mind. It's what happened in 2020, and it's basically like a they get like this Samuel Jackson, and they act as reporters and historians and politicians.
Oh yeah, yeah, I watched
And
that too.
dude, it's fucking Samuel Jackson. I wish he was a reporter who's just sassy as shit all the time because he is hilarious. But anyway, that's 2020. That's the past. For 2021, like you looking forward? Is there anything aside from hopefully the world getting back to some form of normality? Anything you're looking to do as either an artist, an art director, as just a person? Like what's on the horizon for you in 2021?
Yeah, for me, like one of the big things, obviously, I'm gonna get Polygon Academy videos and series. So that's probably like one of my top priorities. Is like one of my passion. Start to reinvest my time in that. So that would be great. My goal was to travel more, which I've already kind of started. I moved from Montreal to I'm staying in Vancouver for the next few months, which is nice. A nice
Mm.
change of pace, change of location, avoid the minus 30-degree weather and stuff
Yeah,
like that. Which is actually kind of goes back to the whole remote thing, as I have that mobility, right? Like
yeah,
I'm like I hate winter, and obviously there's a pandemic going on and stuff like that right now. So I'm just going to relocate within Canada, follow all the rules, all that kind of stuff. Relocate within Canada, get an Airbnb for a couple, 2-3 months, and kind of just add that nice flexibility to my own life and kind of hopefully reinvigorate myself a little bit there. So, as fingers crossed that COVID starts to eventually go away and borders start to open up and people can kind of start to resume international travel. Ideally, hopefully towards the tail end of 2021, maybe take some time to travel somewhere and again do the slow travel thing and like work remotely. So that's kind of where I want to start intentionally designing my lifestyle. So really, yeah, those are the kind of the two big things. It's just obviously continue to work on my leadership skills and abilities, and hopefully continue to support the team, and then also just focus on my time on the spinning plate that is Polygon Academy. That it's starting to wobble, right? I haven't spun it in quite a while, but
mm.
so I think it's time to put some content out for that and just really start to focus on that as a business and kind of a side hustle. And again, just like I said at the start of the call, provide enough value that when push comes to shove, hopefully I can turn it into a super successful brand. So
Makes sense, dude. Yeah, that I'll be so excited. I won't lie. I still reference a lot of the Polygon. Well, it's my number one. Like, oh, what do I need to learn? You need to learn trim sheets. Where should I go for that? Here is the one YouTube video you need in your life if you like want to get into this stuff. So I'm really looking forward to some more Polygon Academy stuff. It's one of the best learning resources online. Like a lot of the stuff is kind of you go on YouTube and you search like how do I do whatever this thing, and it's like you get some pretty ropey interesting quality videos come through, and then it's like, I don't know, here's your one-stop shop for all that sort of stuff.
That's man, that's super nice to hear. I really like that.
I don't,
I'm glad. I
legit.
get messages like that all the time, actually. And like obviously, videos are sitting there, like continuing to gain subscribers and views and stuff. Still continue to get messages, pretty much every day of people asking questions or just saying, "Hey, thanks for making the videos and stuff." So that's been super nice. But it's time for me to kind of make some more content. People are hungry for it, so
Yeah,
it's finally time to get the pedal back into revving the engine and get that stuff going. So.
dude, that's good shit. But yeah, I really appreciate you coming back on. Like, this is it's weird speaking. Like I said, it's weird speaking to you. So I'm gonna be speaking to you tomorrow in our meetings. But
Yeah, of course.
everyone listening, we're back. It's good. The podcast is gonna be bi-weekly now. Remember to, especially with this one, just so everyone knows it's back. Like, share, subscribe, all that crap. But just make sure people are aware that we are back up and running. But Tim, dude, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Anytime, man.